In this video, we're going to be discussing thyroid hormone. So remember, thyroid hormone is produced in the thyroid gland, which is this gland that sits on the front of your trachea. And you can see that in this image. The trachea is the windpipe. And you can see it's not really that big of a gland. It has these two lobes, and then it has this isthmus, which connects in the middle. Now, this is the gland that produces thyroid hormone, and there's two types of thyroid hormone. There's triiodothyronine, which is T3, and tetraiodothyronine, which is more commonly called Thyroxine, and that's T4. Now, one unique thing about thyroid hormone is it requires the element iodine. Okay, so this is actually incorporated into the molecule. It's one of the few things in the body that actually uses this. And it's called T3 and T4 because of the number of iodine molecules that are actually put, or iodine atoms rather, that are put into the molecule. Okay, so there's 3 in T3 and 4 in T4. Now, remember that this hormone is regulated along what we call the Hypothalamic-Pituitary-Thyroid axis, aka the HPT axis, one of the 3 major hormonal axes. And it all starts at the top with the hypothalamus, which releases this TRH, or thyrotropin releasing hormone, which is a tropic hormone that tells the anterior pituitary to release TSH, okay, which is thyroid stimulating hormone. And subsequently, TSH will tell the thyroid gland to release T4 and T3. Now notice that as levels of T4 and T3 rise, okay, they exert negative feedback, okay, on both the anterior pituitary and the hypothalamus, telling them, hey, there's a lot of us now, so we don't need more TRH and we don't need more TSH. And so as T4 and T3 levels increase, levels of TSH and TRH decrease. And that's a very common MCAT question, negative feedback. Okay. Now, what do these hormones do? Well, these are extremely important hormones for a lot of different things. In fact, you could say that they impact pretty much every system in the body. So first of all, we can say that thyroid hormone, okay, thyroid hormone increases basal metabolic rate. So really, this is going to just increase different metabolic processes in cells, okay, and it will also increase oxygen consumption by cells. It's also super important for growth, okay? So first of all, in utero, or while the baby is developing as a fetus, okay, this is very important for the development of the nervous system. And actually, iodine deficiency basically during pregnancy can lead to congenital hypothyroidism because the thyroid hormone is not being produced, and one of the characteristics of that is actually impaired neurological development, okay? Now, it's also really important for the cardiovascular system. In fact, T4 and T3 will basically increase heart rate and cardiac output. It's very important for things like basically concentration, memory, mood, regulation, etc. It's important for increasing respiratory rates and basically, you know, delivering oxygen to the lungs. And then it's also important for GI motility. So it actually, when you have a lot of it, it increases basically digestion and actually can lead to diarrhea if you have too much of it, okay? And then many other processes, all right? So it's very, very important. Now let's talk about some important things to remember about thyroid hormone. First of all, this is actually produced from the amino acid tyrosine, okay? So remember that there's actually a couple of hormones that are produced from tyrosine, including the catecholamines, so norepinephrine and epinephrine and dopamine, but then there's also thyroid hormone. Now, what's important is actually that there are 2 tyrosine amino acids making up the structure of T4 and T3, whereas those other ones, you only use 1 tyrosine. Now, as a result of that, these are actually lipid-soluble. Okay, so this is actually one of those exceptions where it's a non-steroid hormone, but it's lipid soluble. And as we know, when we have a lipid soluble hormone, it requires carrier protein. Okay, it requires carrier proteins to carry it in the bloodstream since it's not soluble in water. And actually, the carrier protein that carries this is called thyroxine binding globulin, and it's produced in the liver like most carrier proteins are. Now, the additional consequence of it being lipid soluble is it doesn't bind to membrane receptors, right? So it will be able to diffuse across the cell membrane since it's lipophilic, and then it will bind to intracellular receptors. So these actually have intracellular, okay, receptors, all right? So those are some really important things to remember about thyroid hormone because they like to ask about this. They like to kind of, try to trick you about whether or not this is lipophilic, right? This is the one exception besides steroid hormones that we have to know that is actually a lipophilic hormone, okay? And then remember, you don't have to remember all the functions of thyroid hormone, but just understand that it increases metabolism and it's really important for growth. So deficiencies can lead to impaired growth. And then really importantly, remember this negative feedback mechanism, okay? That, when you have increased levels of T4 and T3, you're going to shut down the pituitary gland and the hypothalamus, specifically with respect to them releasing TSH and TRH. All right. Now, another little fun fact for you to remember is that while there are two forms of thyroid hormone, T3 and T4, T4, okay, is the one that is mostly, this is the main one produced. So main one produced. Okay, this is the main one produced. However, T3 is actually the active form. So this is the active form of this hormone. And that's important because what happens is T4 is produced in abundance in the thyroid gland, and then when it reaches the actual cell, it will be converted into T3, and T3 is going to be the one that really exerts most of the effect on cells. So just keep that in mind.